This is GT Racing right now.
He's got traction, he's got everything outside of both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson! Anderson's up to him!
Oh my god! Oh! Big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled!
Second very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly.
Oh, there we go!
Oh no! That's massive! This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?
Assist to the front bumper!
iRacing, you wanted the best, you got them 4 abreast, often imitated, never duplicated, the greatest show on dirt, the World of Outlaws.
Welcome one, welcome all to a SimSpeed TV presentation on the iRacing Esports Network. This is the Geodesic GoPro Championship GT Sprint. We've got GT and GS action coming up for you. An hour and 15 minutes around the magnificent Mid-Ohio circuit, just outside Lexington in Ohio. And it's round 8 of what has been quite the interesting championship. Round 6, I should correct myself. Here at Mid-Ohio, we've visited 3 different continents, 4 different countries. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how things go at this very tight and twisty, historic racetrack. My name is Reese Gardner. Joining me in the commentary box is David Haynes once again. David, once again, we are in qualifying for our GS class at the moment, but Mid-Ohio is certainly going to throw up a few surprises as we come out of quite the interesting round of the championship last time at Barcelona.
Well, every single round of this championship has had its own intrigues and interests, and this will undoubtedly be no different. Qualifying underway right now, and this circuit, you know, the back half incredibly twisty, flip-floppy, up and down hills, a lot of blind corners there. Difficult to pass traffic, difficult to make an overtake in that part of the circuit. Your best 3 positions are sort of into turn 1, into turn 2 at the keyhole, and the exit of sort of the back straight there towards China Beach. But then outside of those 3 places, very difficult to get around someone here.
Yeah, it certainly is, which means that qualifying is incredibly important. But these drivers still navigating their way around this place to decide how they start on the grid today. First, let's have a look at the championship standings, because the GT standings are starting to look quite interesting. After round 5 at Barcelona, Dominic Olivier leads the championship. Remember, he missed round 1, but thanks to mistakes from Tyson Meyer and some incidents for Asim Fazui, including one very unfortunate incident at turn 1 in Barcelona, it means that Olivier is now 23 points ahead of his 2 closest rivals, and Zach Plummer not that far behind either for 4th.
Yeah, it's all looking pretty close there. And my goodness, how close is it from, 8th, 9th, and 10th there as well? 2 points to separate 3 drivers inside of our top 10. So the GT is obviously very close in the standings, and it's our class that has our variety of different GT3 marks. We've got inside your top 10 there, as you can see, the Mercedes and the Audi and the Ferrari. There does not appear to be a McLaren inside the top 10 in our standings, but we've very much enjoyed seeing some of the drivers race the McLaren.
Yeah, we certainly have. Johan Boyson and Jesper Drilica are 2 of the drivers out there today driving the McLaren, as well as Maxime Datilly, who has put it into the top 6 in GT. So we'll see if he can break into the top 10 in these standings by the end of the season. But the GS standings are looking quite competitive as well, because the battle of the class is between Brian Lockwood and Andrew Caron for the lead. And, Andrew Caron certainly coming away the best with the win at Barcelona last round. And Lockwood having some bad luck in recent rounds for the Racecraft Esports team, David. But certainly looks like this championship fight is going to continue as is at Mid-Ohio.
Yeah, Brian Lockwood wasn't able to make the last round of the championship due to his commitments in the Porsche Esports Super Cup, but he's on the grid, it does look like, for today's race. And having missed one race, he's still at the top of the championship, but he can't afford to have a bad result with that said.
Yeah, certainly not, but just 18 points between himself and Caron. Giovanni Romano and Marcus Deck certainly are going to be fighting as well. Marcus Deck probably deserves to be fighting up there with Lockwood and Caron, but he's had his fair share of incidents over the course of the season as well. Spins and run-ins with other cars down in the field. But certainly it means that, if he can capitalize, he certainly stands to benefit a lot. He has poled it in the GS class. So now we're going to take a look at the pole positions for both of our classes. The first, Racine Fazui, absolutely stomping his authority on the GT field once again with time that is almost 1.5 tenths clear of Robert Harris in second. So we start off at Mid-Ohio on this short front straight and then braking late 4th gear into a left-hand sweeper, just touching the curb on the inside. And then we've got a straight here. The track used to go right there into that chicane and down into the keyhole, but the current layout of the circuit has a straight run into this downhill hairpin. Got a late apex it. Get the car rotating on the exit. Do not hit the curb too hard. Don't go into the grass. Just passing the start zone here. Drivers are going to be starting on this back straight, and this turn coming up here is effectively going to serve as turn 1 when we go green. And then a very tight twisting section of hairpins over the hill. You got to make sure the front end doesn't wash out over that crest. Bring it back around to the left-hand side. And this section of the circuit, very important to keep the car's trajectory nice and straight. You don't want to go too far to the left. You don't want to compromise your entry into this right-hander. And over the hill again. You've got to be very smooth on the throttle. And this is one of the hardest corners on the circuit. Right, and then a very fast left. There's only one line through there, and you stand to gain or lose a lot of time. And then a tightening right-hander, the penultimate corner on this circuit, flat out through a left-hander to end the lap. That's a 1 minute 20.899 for Racine Fazui in his privateer Ferrari. quite the competitive time that we saw, and he's looking very smooth around this place because Mid-Ohio is one of those circuits that is quite bumpy, and we don't usually expect the Audi to be the best GT3 car around a circuit like this, but Racine Fazui putting down a fantastic time there, David.
Yeah, certainly. You've got to be so precise and keep it on exactly the right line through some of those corners. You go over the crest at Thunder Valley, at turn 11, coming towards the carousel, blind, turning left across the crest at high speed. You've got to exactly know where the track goes, place your car perfectly for corners like that. That's where the really good drivers get separated from the rest here at Mid-Ohio.
Exactly right. Marcus Deck setting a 1 minute 27.635 to start on pole in the GS class. We'll have a look at that lap very shortly and see what it takes to wheel a Porsche 718 Cayman GT4 around a place like this. The GT4 class, David, called GS in this championship, certainly very different to the GT machinery. A lot less downforce in these things. They rely a bit more on mechanical grip, but you can really chuck these things around and take advantage of the oversteer.
Yeah, you certainly see they're not quite as planted as a more developed GT3 car. They sort of bounce and roll and pitch across all of the bumps. And I saw this through almost all of the session. Marcus Deck was right behind Andrew Caron. And I wonder if at some points he just picked up a slightly better slipstream from this. And that was what helped, what mattered. He was, as you can see from the replay here, just getting towed around by Andrew Caron. This was Marcus Deck's fastest lap. This was the fastest lap anyone set, and he did it just a car length back from Andrew Caron, almost the whole lap around.
Yeah, goodness me. I usually get too distracted when I'm following this close behind another car in qualifying, but
maybe Marcus Deck is a bull. He's just seeing the red from the car and charging along.
Yeah, like the proverbial carrot on a fishing rod for a donkey. But Marcus Deck as certainly knowing his way around this Mid-Ohio racetrack, but very clean lines all up, and you see he's fighting the car just a little bit, but at the end of the day, a very clean lap behind Andrew Caron, setting a 1 minute 27.635, and that puts him just about 2/10 clear of Andrew Caron, who he benefited from on that lap.
And you saw how close, Andrew Caron's pace must have been, the two of them going around together on track. That's the case for all of the GS class. Our top four are within under 4/10 of a second. Our top five are within 4/10 of a second, if I see this correctly. So it is very, very close in qualifying, and we know that the slipstream for those cars certainly going to help them out of the keyhole and towards China Beach. So I think they'll race even closer.
Indeed they shall. We'll be seeing a bit of line experimentation around here for sure. A lot of varying corner radiuses. We have the elevation change to contend with as well. And tracks like Mid-Ohio, much more dependent on drivers that have a nice, stable mechanical grip biased setup. So it will be interesting to see who has got their car tuned right for this place, who's able to take advantage of the foibles that Mid-Ohio offers. Just got a couple of minutes left before we go over to the race session as the drivers go through their pre-race briefing. We'll think about the qualifying results briefly. Tyson Meyer, who was leading the championship up until last round, he's starting in third place in the GT class. Now, championship leader, it seems, is starting in 7th place. So it's going to be quite the interesting drive for the two Geodesic GTs. Tyson Meyer from third, with Blake Neck being a third Geodesic GT in the top 10, starting from 4th. He can certainly do some good things from there, but Robert Harris qualifying on the first row there with Racine Fazui. Luis Henriquez and Garrett Thompson rounding out the top 10 in our GT class, with Zach Plummer qualifying a very respectable 8th there. Johan Boyson, the second McLaren, in 11th place, with Will Hardeman sharing the 6th row with him. Hayden Gober and Jesper Drilica rounding out the top 14. Aaron Ackles and Jason Gotter, 15th and 16th. And with 18 cars in our GT classes tonight, Stacey Dunnigan and Jack Anderek rounding out the field. Only 2 seconds difference or so between the top and the bottom of our GT class, looking quite a respectable gap between the field, David. But now we take a look at the grid for the GS class.
That we do. We saw Marcus Deck's pole lap and how close his times are to Andrew Caron in second. Brian Lockwood, defending champ and points leader, in third place. John Botifer then in fourth. Giovanni Romano in fifth place on the grid there. Graham Sanders with him for company. Alan Powell 7th. Luke Wodacek in 8th. Jeff Sexton in 9th. Chris Roberts in 10th. And then the final car in that class over the page. He looks lonely on this, but he's not going to be lonely out on track. No qualifying time for David Browning. And in fact, I do recall he had a mechanical problem in qualifying and will not be starting the race. That's unfortunate for David Browning.
Yeah, certainly is. But for the likes of John Botifer, Giovanni Romano, who had very good results last round at Barcelona, they'll be looking to capitalize and maintain that momentum. Jeff Sexton as well, going to be looking for redemption. He was the car that unfortunately took out Racim Fazui when he was leading the race at Barcelona. So he'll be looking to use a bit more care in the braking zones this time around. Is Jeff the real life racer? But we wish him all the best indeed. 45 degrees track temperature. That's interesting.
Yeah, certainly a couple things to look at for the race there in the conditions. We've got a new pace car as well. Previous rounds we've had the Porsche 911. We've gone for the big Chevy truck to lead the field. Thankfully, it pulls into the pit lane, and then our leader controls the field most of the way towards where our starting zone is. But take a look at that. They're not gonna miss that pace truck. And if we do have a safety car at any point during this race, we're going to see that pace truck again. Not quite what you expect for a sports car road course, but they're mixing it up and it'll do a fine job. So 75-minute race coming up. You see the track temperature at the moment, very, very hot, 45 degrees Celsius. And the fuel cap on our GS class has been reduced from a 75% tank to a 70% tank. So that is hopefully going to force a pit stop out of both of our classes today, Reese.
Yeah, certainly. The thing that we have seen over these last few rounds is that the GS class typically only pits for a bit of fuel, maybe a little splash and tires as well, but pit stop being forced in both of our classes, definitely a good thing here today. They're all off. Once again, we got $25 for the most laps without an incident, courtesy of Alpine Stars in this round. So the drivers will want to be extra careful around a track like Mid-Ohio that is absolute off-track city. So the pace truck is now in the pits, but Racing Fazui is going to be controlling the field until they get to the start zone on the back stretch, just by China Beach. And the Q will be the access road that loops back around to rejoin the circuit around about here on the other side of the circuit. So Racim Fazui still controlling the pace and coming through the keyhole to take the green flag.
Yeah, we can have individual starts for each of our class as well. You can see we've got our beautiful GT class, and then our GS class will also start, but the 75 minutes timing has already started, so that might also play into the fuel economy on some of the other classes. They're going to pack up. They're just about entering the starting zone.
And there we go. Racim Fazui passes the cones on the right-hand side and jumps everyone else. He enjoys a beautiful gap as they come into the first turn of the Geodesic GoPro Championship at Mid-Ohio. Robert Harris defending against Tyson Meyer for second place as they come through the very tight hairpins for the first time. Over the hill seems like a clean start for GT. In GS, they have just taken the start, and Andrew Caron has gotten a nice jump over Marcus Deck, which we certainly were not expecting. Down into the first turn for them, Andrew Caron leads, and they all fall into line as it looks like Brian Lockwood maintaining that third place.
At our first little bit of contact in the GT class, Hayden Gober got half turned around and then got that car facing the right way again, but he might have picked up some damage because there he goes off the circuit again. He wasn't entirely happy there. That was coming through Thunder Valley, I think, on lap 1. Of course, GT field all very close together, and we've got another little spinner.
Oh, we have, and that's Dominic Olivier, championship leader. Not going to work out well for him. That's in turn 1. And I'm wondering how that happened. It looks to me like he did it entirely on his own. Just a bit of oversteer on the exit. On the entry, sorry, to turn 1. So he's managed to resume running. Maxime Detilly, meanwhile, joins us on our Zoom live web feed call-in. One of the McLaren drivers in our GT field. He put on a great drive at Barcelona last round. Looking forward to seeing what he can do in the McLaren at Mid-Ohio. He currently runs in position 6 and starting to pull away from Adam Crane. But right now, it's Blake Neck, Tyson Meyer, Robert Harris, and Racine Vazui ahead of him, starting to pull away and spacing out evenly.
Yeah, beautiful livery for Detilly. He's got a good jump, but another McLaren not having quite such a good time. Jesper Drilica is dropped quite a couple of positions so far. Qualified 14th, he's now dropped 4. He's the trailing of all of the GT class runners at the moment. So a bit of excitement in the opening laps in this class. It includes Maxime Detilly having jumped Adam Crane off the start. Start procedure might have caught some of the drivers out just a little bit. It was interesting to see your second place GS class car on the outside get the jump towards functionally turn 1.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think there might have been a slight error from GS on the start, but not quite enough to make the start invalid. Jack Anderek running in position 15. He's chasing down Aaron Ackles, one of the Quasar sim racing boys. And Ackles is coming up behind Stacey Dunnigan. They are battling hard. This is going to give an advantage to Jack Anderek on the third lap of this race.
Yeah, Dunnigan's jumped a couple positions here from the problems that have befallen Hayden Gober, Dominic Olivier, and others. So Dunnigan's grabbed a couple positions. Now there's some of these drivers, like you see, are trying to get back past. It's created a tiny bit of a logjam, and we've mentioned this circuit, tough to pass at.
Yeah, certainly. It's a place where the only real big passing zones are down into the keyhole at the other end of the back stretch as well. You can potentially size up a run through this first turn because Garrett Thompson falling under some immense pressure here from Will Hardiman for 10th place in GT. But it looks like Thompson getting the better exit out of turn 1 and going very hard into the keyhole, which is an interesting corner. You can brake very late for it, I've found, in many cars. Quite a misleading turn, but it's all about lining up that exit. The actual margin for error through the corner is very narrow.
There's one thing I definitely noticed watching the qualifying laps there is the keyhole, our GT pole sitter, had a very, very late apex, which is not quite what I was expecting. Well, side by side here, towards the S's before Thunder Valley, real check-up. Looks like Boyson might have grabbed a spot.
No, actually, Boyson made a mistake and fell backwards into the clutches of Garrett Thompson, and he's just managed to break free of it. He was fighting with Zach Plummer before, but now he is unfortunately having to do all of that work again. But Boyson is a driver that we've seen bring on some excellent results in the McLaren, particularly at low fuel use tracks. And I think Mid-Ohio is a lower fuel use track with the McLaren's fuel tank being what it is. It's not going to help Boyson's line through turn 1, though, running about half a car length wide. Going defensive now versus Garrett Thompson. With a late braking zone once again. Can Thompson hold it round the outside of the keyhole? No, he's tried to, but a little bit of contact between Boyson and an over-under attempt later. The McLaren stays ahead. Will Hardiman and Jason Goddard behind, and the two Mercedes are going to be enjoying this.
Yeah, certainly. They've got a prime view. The general consensus is that the McLaren's pretty good in a straight line, but in these other places, maybe he's getting a little bit rattled and the pressure is on. Doesn't quite have the confidence and the poise in these very, very hot track temperatures. As look at that dive there. Caught him napping. He's looking forwards. Now suddenly, just fends off the attack.
Yeah, wow. Excellent moves there that are going on at the moment, because Mid-Ohio, a lot of potential for side-by-side running. So if Garrett Thompson can put down some consistent times and stay with Boyson, I think he'll do much better from here on in. Battle up ahead as well. Luis Henriquez, another one of the McLarens. He has got Zach Plummer in hot pursuit of him as they come into turn 1 for 7th place in the GT class. They've separated out a fair bit, and it seems that a lot of the packs that are forming around here are in packs of 1 or 2, aside from this pack you see on screen, which is 3 or 4 cars. Will Hardiman still very much on the back of Garrett Thompson. In terms of our GS class, we're getting the first drivers coming through from lapping them. Jesper Drelica just coming through on our GS class leader. But the top 3, it seems, in our GS class, David, they have stuck together like glue. Andrew Caron still leads. Marcus Deck and Brian Lockwood in very hot pursuit.
Indeed. I mean, we saw how massively, massively close those times were in qualifying. In the race, it's looking just about the same. Whoa, quick hands from Brian Lockwood there. He got a little bit of the curb on the inside of turn 1 there. Might have spat him out a little bit wide. He's lost a couple tenths just as we were talking about it.
Yeah, certainly. That's something Brian will want to recover from quickly, because now Marcus Deck is going to try and skip away. Thing we've noticed about the racing in the GS class is it's a slow burner. The drivers don't throw it up the inside at every opportunity they can. It's a lot more of a measured attack from drivers in the GS class, so I reckon we'll be able to see Lockwood come back. Thanks to building optimization systems on the replays, we're getting a replay of something that's happened here between Thompson and Boyson.
We've just seen the replay of Brian Lockwood getting too much of that curb, having an oversteering moment. Back live with the GT battle here, where Boyson in the McLaren. Thought we were going to be perfectly poised to see some rearward shooting flames there, like we love from the McLaren GT3. Didn't quite get them, but well, maybe from this shot. Oh yes, that's exactly what I wanted. That is going to be a flame-grilled Ferrari if this keeps up for a couple more laps. Garrett Thompson still right there with Boyson, looking for a way past. But we saw earlier, he's in this tough position. He's trying to attack Boyson, and the minute he does, Will Hardiman behind is looking to put the move on him. That's what cost him a bit of time a couple of laps ago there, is suddenly Hardiman saw an opportunity.
Yeah, that's the thing with Mid-Ohio. When you're trying different lines to get around someone, what it does is slow both of you up monumentally, because this circuit has turns that majority flow directly into each other. Have a look at Hardiman having a look up the inside there into turn 1, early turn in. Garrett Thompson is both attacking and looking over his shoulder at the moment, and he pulls out for a look. He gets on the brakes much later than Johan Boyson into the keyhole, and he takes the move there. That moves him up into 9th place, but can Boyson come back at him? Thompson dips a wheel into the grass. Boyson gets the better run. The power of the McLaren, the twin-turbo V8. matching the twin-turbo V8 of the Ferrari in a straight line. Garrett Thompson behind me, while he's going for the big dive is Garrett. Can he pull it up in time? No, not quite. But can he stay ahead of Boyson? They make contact in the previous turn, but Hardiman having the outside line, the inside line, sorry, into the turn, and he takes it, and it continues again. Garrett Thompson now falling into the clutches of Gotta and Olivier, who has come out of nowhere here.
Crazy couple of corners there. All you can say is the big winner is Will Hardiman. Johan Boyson comes out of it not looking too shabby, and that attack, that dive from Garrett Thompson just simply has not stuck. As you mentioned, Dominic Olivier is right at the back of them. Someone's off in front of them. Luis Henriquez is off the circuit at the carousel, rejoins next to Will Hardiman. This is a crazy pack this early in the race. There's still more than an hour to go.
Oh, and have a look at Garrett Thompson. Oh, Johan Boyson, he has absolutely cooked the entry to turn one, and Jason Goddard has got it wrong on the exit too. Both of those drivers just putting a little bit too much heat into their tires in the heat of battle. Building optimization systems replay then. And I got the cue right. Luis Henriquez went off at the carousel, and with a compromised exit, Hardiman just went right on by. But then what of Boyson and Gotta? Well, Boyson just a little bit too much rear brake and probably surprised by that move. Jason Gotta, meanwhile,
helped around by Dominic Olivier, who maybe couldn't see what was going on, didn't look massively intentional. It's close racing here, and there was just a little bit of a tap as the field checks up with, spinning cars in front. And Olivier just hits back of Gotta, who was trying to avoid the half-spun Boyson.
That's a shame there for Jason Goddard. Didn't deserve that. But nonetheless, the race continues, and Dominic Olivier is moved up somewhat from where he was. Still has yet to go more towards his starting position of 7th. So, as we continue watching this battle for 5th place between Adam Crane and Maxime Detilly, they're just coming up on the GS class now. Crane going through on one of the Big Bone Racing Porsche GT4s. We should announce that we have a YouTube viewer prize of $25. If you're watching at the moment and you want to have a shot at winning $25 cold hard cash, if you use the code word JIsTheMan, send that code word to geodesicracing@gmail.com. The team at Geodesic Racing will select the winner at random. The code word is JIsTheMan. And we know he is.
We've become breakfast TV radio announcers here. Call in and you could be our lucky winner, I guess, is what we're saying there.
Yeah, of course. Bringing breakfast radio to sim racing as you do. So Maxime Detilly making his way past, and Brian Lockwood back into 4th after having made a mistake, and he's going to waste no time trying to get by John Botifer. Dominic Olivier, meanwhile, has entered the pits as Lockwood completes this move. Olivier had an incident on the way into the pits too. The incident is under review, running into the back of Jason Gotta for Dominic Olivier. So race control will make a decision on that one. John Botifer, meanwhile, not done here with Brian Lockwood. He smells a 3rd place, definitely. He held it for a short while and he wants it back.
Yep. Indeed, in the GS class. Again, I'm wondering what the pit strategy is going to be for those cars, having had their fuel amount reduced somewhat from previous rounds. But still, this is quite an economical circuit here at Mid-Ohio. There is this section, the whole back of the circuit here. You can really roll the speed, roll the momentum of the car, just as Hayden Gober sort of rolls his head into the corners.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a surprise, the fuel strategy for us here at SimSpeed. Hayden Gober concentrating hard as he chases down Jack Anderek And he's going to get an advantage here because both Anderek and Ackles making their way past the Geodesic GT4 of Chris Roberts. So they've all managed to get through cleanly. But Anderek concentrating hard as well, battling for a position in the top 10. Running wide in turn 1, not going to help him. And those balloons certainly will be will be fitting if he manages to get into this top 10, because it's been a very hard job for these guys over the first 12 laps of this race.
Yeah, it's getting hard right now as they're coming through on that traffic. Got the two classes of big bone racing car there going past each other. Jack Anderek slides ahead of his teammate in another class.
Yeah, Luke Wojciech in the GS Big Bone machine. Anderek now right on the rear bumper of Aaron Ackles, and having to slow up a bit because they're contending with Alan Powell in the number 44 GS class machine. This is allowed Garrett Thompson to really break away from these guys. Shows how much navigating traffic matters. And Alan Powell goes side by side here with Jack Anderek. Anderek's going to have to take the long way around. Of course, there is no full obligation to let cars by completely. Blue flags are advisory, but they should be followed in any case. But that has concluded that section of the battle. There is now a GS class car between Ackles and Anderek, which is going to change imminently. So they're still continuing to pick their way through this traffic, and they're coming up to the leaders now, but shows how much the ebb and flow of traffic navigation matters in a sports car race.
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely critical right there. Some of our packs broken up a little bit in GT, except this one, which has been so fantastic. Stacey Dunnigan's also managed to close up a little bit on Hayden Gober in the class here. But then, you know, again, when you're going through traffic, those gaps ebb and flow. They sort of open up and close up depending on where and how you catch this traffic and how aggressive you want to be. We did see Gober just be quite patient. Same too for Jack Anderek, some of the cars. Not sure if Stacey Dunnigan's maybe being a little more aggressive through the traffic. Not there, which is one of the places you can maybe try and put a pass on. Has to wait till a bit closer towards the carousel.
Yes, indeed. And we'll see how the balance of aggression pans out over the course of this one. Got some news from race control meanwhile. Dominic Olivier has been given a drive-through penalty for his collision before with Jason Gotter. So he either has just served it or will imminently serve it. So race control right on the case once again. But right now, Dunnigan picking their way through the GT traffic. He's got a long way up before they can try and attack for a top 10 position. But Hayden Gober right in front is carrying some damage, so it's not going to hurt Stacey too much picking through this traffic in the early stages of this race. Meanwhile,
looking at Graham Sanders and Jeff Sexton as we are, and they are our closest battle, or at least for a minute there, were in the GS class. Quite different lines through this section here. Jeff Sexton's closed up quite significantly. There is, you know, a couple of different setup options for your Cayman GT4. One of them is the rear wing angle, so I don't know what the difference might be here, but certainly this does seem like a track where you'd probably want it turned up a little bit more for that balance and that grip. Especially track temperature is still close to 44 degrees Celsius, still quite hot, quite slick.
Yeah, so that means that the car is going to be much more likely to understeer coming into the turns. So drivers might tune out a couple of clicks of rear wing, but they'd still want a fair amount of downforce on the back of their cars, again, for that stability. And here comes Jeff Sexton on Graham Sanders trying into turn 1, but no dice there for now. They got the GT class car, Jason Gotter, navigating his way around them right here. And coming into the keyhole, Sexton's going to have the outside line, and he is on the rubber, but does not pull it up. He's going to go for the late apex, see if he can get a run down the back stretch, but this battle between Sexton and Sanders for the 7th position in our GS class certainly heating up. Sexton trying again, having a slight little look down the inside, but you know, despite the fact that this car has anti-lock brakes, it's difficult to pull off a pass in this thing.
Yeah, and Alan Powell's also joined the picture there in the blue Deep Eddy car in the background as these guys start to battle. So it's forming up a unique and interesting kind of battle. This place in this class here. Sanders looks like just a little bit more confident hopping across some of the curbs in places, which is a difficult thing to be confident with in this car. You see how much it pitches and bounces and rolls on an uneven surface. It seems to be helping through that section of the course, but there's no doubt that if Sexton gets a good exit onto the backstretch, the slipstream is definitely worth a couple tenths of a second to really close you in and give an opportunity towards China Beach.
Look at how deep Sexton goes into turn 1. He fires it right towards the inside. Certainly shows that there's multiple approaches to how you can go fast in this thing. Sexton just lunging in the braking zones, nearly getting into the rear of Graham Sanders. He is trying to lean on the ABS as much as he possibly can, but it's not helping him in terms of exit. He still has the same gap back here along the back stretch. So is he going to try another dive up here? Briefly pulls out to have a slight look, but decides against it for now. I'm really enjoying this battle between Sexton and Sanders. It seems in those heavy braking zones, Sexton is much more confident.
Yeah, really firing it in, but then the mid-corner speed and the exit speed is about the same. So if you can get side by side, that kind of confidence, I'm sure, will really help seal the overtake, but it's not helping him get in a position to actually make the overtake just yet. You see through here, again, suddenly Sexton's not so close. Sanders riding a little bit more to the curb, taking some tighter lines. Might have been a little bit wide across the crest there, which is very easy to do into the carousel. Another place you really want to pick up a late apex to get a great exit.
Yeah, exactly, and both drivers do that. And they're starting to pull away again slightly from Alan Powell, but that might very well change over the course of this next lap. No big dive at turn 1 for Jeff Sexton that time around, but you can tell that a move is potentially brewing between these guys. Sanders going nice and tight into the keyhole, and you see Alan Powell in the background going for the late apex, try and draft onto the back of this and make it a 3-car pack again. It's amazing the kinds of battles that you see in this series, and it doesn't matter where in the field you are, you most likely have someone to race with. Sexton having the draft, and he is now closer to Sanders than he's ever been, right on the bumper, coming through the right-hander, and he'll be hoping that Sanders has another running wide moment around the back section here of Mid-Ohio.
Closer than in previous laps, that's for sure. Pressure is on in this little battle.
Over the crest then, Graham Sanders getting a much better exit, and that's what happens in that right-hander. The crest is after the apex, and if you can straight line the corner exit as much as you can, you'll get a much better exit. So Sanders getting it better than Sexton on that particular occasion. They do have a bit of GT traffic here, though. This is Dominic Olivier making his way through after his drive-through penalty, and side by side into turn 1. Jeff Sexton lets him go, and that means that he has briefly lost touch with Graham Sanders. But the way this battle has been going, we certainly expect it to continue as it has been. Meanwhile, in the GT class, well, our top 5 has separated from each other quite a bit, but the battle for 6th place in GT is heating up at the moment. Maxime Detilly and Zach Plummer are still going at it here, coming out of the final turn. Detilly, 1 minute 23.2 on that lap, with a 22.9 from Zach Plummer. The Audi is looking very quick here.
Yeah, certainly. People don't necessarily praise the McLaren for looking after its tyres either. And as we've alluded to with some of the track temperatures, this is certainly one of those rounds where looking after those tyres might be important. Normally, in these 75-minute races, our GT competitors take fuel only. That's not a long enough stop to change their tyres. So you start a race like this knowing you're going to do more than a full stint on those tyres, most likely.
Oh,
What's the look here? Big move.
yeah, okay, and Detilly actually lifted off before the braking zone there. He's actually, is he letting Plummer go? No, he's not. But something happened to him in the braking zone. I'm not quite sure. Maybe he's trying to save a bit of fuel. Either way, they continue to run side by side through this section as Zach Plummer completes the move after what seemed like an excruciatingly long time. Interesting stuff there from Maxime Detilly. Why did he lift?
I don't know. Is that... Well, you remember Johan Boyson no-stopped at Barber in a McLaren in a 75-minute race.
He did.
Is Mid-Ohio similar in some respects to Barber?
I was alluding to that point earlier as, oh, that's a big problem for Johan Boyson. And that is on the run-up to the carousel at the end of the lap. Boyson was having trouble in that left-hander before, building optimization systems replay of the incident. Let's have a look at what happened to him. And the McLaren, an unstable car at the best of times, but it has its fans. See what happened to Boyson here over the bump, and rear end just breaks free, tries correcting it, and the car swings right back around on him. That McLaren, such a knife-edge machine. Real shame for Boyson too, because he was fighting very well up in that field.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a car that lacks grip at the rear end, just that when it lets go, it doesn't give you a whole lot of warning. And I think that's what we've seen there. He's turned in, it's looked moderately okay, and then just gets a bit twitchy. Problems there. Every McLaren we look at, unfortunately,
yeah, we're staying
positional.
Yeah, we're staying with the replay because something happened to Luis Henriquez in this other McLaren at the back end of the straight. We'll see what's going on for him here. And that's into the right-hander and losing the rear again. So the McLaren doesn't seem to like the braking zones at this circuit as the race enters its middle stage. We've gone over, or just about to go over, half an hour's race length, and the battle for second. Whoa, have a look at Dominic Olivier picking his way through. Brian Lockwood having to search for another line around, and a mistake from Olivier. Unfortunately, having to come back on track behind the two cars he just made his way past. But Marcus Deck and Brian Lockwood now closer than they've been since the start of the race.
Yeah, and this time I think Olivier makes it a clean move. He did get in a little bit too hot there trying to dive into the gap in traffic. He's well and truly through now, and obviously Lockwood, we saw him pass Bottas a little while ago. He's now ranged up to the back of Marcus Deck, trying to make this his next move.
Yes, indeed. Oh, Lockwood dropping a wheel off the grass there as Boyson makes his way past these guys. And as this is happening, I cannot help but notice that the lead in GT has started closing up as well, because Mr. Robert Harris starting to catch up to Racine Fazui, but Brian Lockwood trying to find a way past Marcus Deck here, not being successful in this slowest section of the circuit, but he does take tighter lines. He knows that he's got what it takes here, does Lockwood. Racing in the Porsche Esports Super Cup this year, as well as real-life racing where he can, dropping another wheel into the grass on the exit. He's starting to get desperate as Brian Lockwood. Difficult to follow a car around here, much harder entry, but has not opened up the entry into the carousel. No move there for Brian Lockwood just yet. It's going to have to be at a place like the Keyhole.
This is your overall lead of the race. Fazui got held up a little bit coming through some of the traffic. Robert L. Harris got right to the rear bumper, and now they're also within just a couple tenths of a second, Audi versus Audi.
Indeed they are, and all have a look at Marcus Deck and Brian Lockwood. They're very close. Lockwood trying for the move into the keyhole, not successful, but Deck goes too deep. They're side by side now into the mid-corner, and on the exit, Lockwood just picks up the throttle a little bit earlier. That gives him the run in the initial exit phase of the corner, but they're going to run side by side the whole way down to China Beach, and almost making contact in a straight line. They do again. Little slight taps, fender taps. Marcus Deck trying to hold it round the outside. Can he do it? He maintains the inside for the left-hander going up the hill, but Lockwood is the one with the advantage here. Oh no, they're going to come together, both of them coming together, making contact. Brian Lockwood, unfortunately, having to slot back in behind, but good recovery from both of them as this lead battle in GT has just come up on them here. This could affect both of these battles. Racine Fazui is going to try and find a way through on Lockwood here. He's going to go up the inside into the left-hander, and Marcus Deck has been ordered to redress the position on Brian Lockwood as both of our leaders make their way through on them.
Great battles in one picture here, and yeah, they raced so hard against each other for our GS positions there, Lockwood and Deck. But Race Control, just like us, had their eyes on it and have said that wasn't a fair defense of the position from Deck.
No, it did look like just coming together in a braking zone and just going into each other. There goes Brian Lockwood back on by Marcus Deck, so the battle will resume between them. So Fazui and Lockwood still locked together as Zach Plummer is one of the first of our GT class that makes his way into the pits. Now, GS class battle for second and third has been given the all clear to keep racing by Race Control as Tyson Meyer in third in GT has just made his way past them. But Racine Fazui is starting to look like he's falling off because Robert Harris, a 10th quicker than him on the last lap. And around a place like Mid-Ohio, that's pretty substantial. He is the leader in our GS class. They're making their way by now. And it looks like, unfortunately, Harris is not going to get by him before the corner. So that's made him lose a bit of ground here to Fazui. Oh, he's going to lose more here.
Caron's thinking, I've got a 5-second lead in my class. Brian Lockwood's just been unleashed into second. I am not giving you any time that I don't have to. I'm going to hold my line through these sections. It's up to you guys with your GT3 cars to go around because I'm not going to give up half a second just to roll out a red carpet for you fellows.
Yeah, exactly. Because lap times are certainly what the GS class is going to be worrying about here. Andrew Caron, 28.7 on that last lap, letting by those GT cars. Meanwhile, Brian Lockwood did a 1 minute 27.9, so taking a fair few tenths out of him, almost a full second. So Andrew Caron does not want to make it too awkward when GT class cars come round to lap him. Maxime Detilly and Garrett Thompson, meanwhile, these guys have been fighting for some time. Detilly, we're hearing from our director, very unhappy on camera, and we're not quite sure why. I think maybe his tyres might be far beyond what they need to be, because remember, Detilly lifted before, and he's lifting again. So he is going for the fuel-saving strategy here. Detilly, hello, he could be a dark horse here. So Garrett Thompson has gone by him, but Detilly now, it looks like, is committing to a no-stop strategy.
Well, we had seen from some of the other races, I'm thinking Montreal and others, where even when the McLaren drivers had to make a pit stop, they were taking 4 or 5 seconds less fuel than some of the other cars and some of the other drivers who weren't worrying about their fuel quite as much. So even if he doesn't make that no-stop strategy, he looks like he's certainly going to have a shorter pit stop if he needs one compared to these guys around him right now, Will Hardiman and Garrett Thompson.
Well, we'll have to wait for the second half of the race to see what goes on for the McLarens, because Detilly now is coming under attack here from Will Hardiman. We've seen how Detilli has lifted off in the heavy braking zones. He's lifting off again, clutching it into the braking zone for the keyhole. It's just driving his own race here is Maxime Detilli at the moment. And you get a good sense, as we see the side-by-side of real and virtual, that this car is quite the handful. And he's going to take advantage of the slight draft he's going to get from Will Hardeman here to save just a little bit more fuel.
That is more coast than Florida right there from him. I did like the onboard there where we saw the handwork in the cockpit and the handwork on the sim. That was fantastic and just goes to show how hard he had to work to keep the rear of the McLaren in line while he's putting the power down. Track temperature is starting to cool off the slightest bit, but it has still been very hot all race long, and no doubt that the tyres are going to be a concern in both of our classes, but especially in this GT class. I'd spoken about the slipstream in the GS class, but I think it's also just as strong in for the GT cars, and we've got the matched Audis for first and second, so that might play in.
Yeah, certainly might, and we could see some drafting here in GS as well, because Giovanni Romano and the purple car up ahead having to go wide in turn one to let by Garrett Thompson and Will Hardeman. And this is going to bring into contention Graham Sanders as Maxime Detilli goes by him. And bit of contact between Thompson and Hardeman running side by side on the exit of the keyhole. What's going to happen between these two? Hardeman has the advantage slightly. He is ahead, but starting to creep up on him is Garrett Thompson round the outside. A better run down the straight. And is he going to outbrake him here? Take it easy, boys. Garrett Thompson into the marbles. A bit of contact between the two of them, and they make rear-end contact too. Will Hardeman forced wide there by Garrett Thompson. They're going to go side by side again into this turn, holding the outside, nearly coming together once again, continuing side by side. I love the racing that this circuit offers, and Garrett Thompson, caught in the marbles again, has to go wide and concede the position. But these guys aren't above a little bit of here and there bump and contact. Let's have a look at a building optimization systems replay of Blake Neck making his way around our leader, or trying to anyway, and unfortunately dipping a wheel in the grass and spinning. These cars do have traction control, but it's not going to save you in that particular situation. And here's another view, David, of the Hardeman and Ferrari incident of Thompson. Goodness me, have a look at the hit that was that he had to deal with there.
When we saw it the first time from the off-board camera angle, and this is obviously a really exciting angle, you see them door to door here, kind of looked like Will Hardeman might have tried to slam the door shut there when there was still a foot in it, and kind of oval short track style got just sort of moved up the road, and the door was opened once again. We'll see if there is any investigation on that one, but both of them survive. It was an exciting piece of racing.
Certainly was. Meanwhile, as they continue to battle off screen, our two Audis, 4/10 between these two. Racine Fazui, the privateer, and Robert Harris for Team Tortuga. And these two have been locked together for the last 10 or so laps. And almost up on half an hour to go in the race. These guys will be starting to think about the pit stop. So Racine Fazui's been going as flat out as he can for much of this race, as has Harris. And Harris will want this lead. He's come away from this without a single victory this season. And last season, when he was driving the GTLM Porsche, he had quite a bit of success in the GoPro Championship, but the switch to GT3 for the top class has not worked out the best for Robert Harris as of yet. Will Hardeman, meanwhile, continuing to follow Maxime Detilli, because it looks like he has lost 2 spots, and okay, so he was ahead of both of these guys. Remember, we saw the very exciting onboard of Hardeman getting by Garrett Thompson. What on earth happened to him here? A mistake on the exit of turn 1, sending him off into the grass, and that compromised run meant Detilli got by as well. Hardeman has gotten back by Detilli. He's been continuing to coast, has the McLaren driver into the heavy braking zones. So Hardiman back by him, but he's going to have to put in a lot of work now to get up to the back of Garrett Thompson. Meanwhile, have a look at John Botifer and Marcus Deck side by side for third in GS, and Deck holding around the outside in the marbles on one of the most difficult corners on the circuit. This is not going to help Garrett Thompson with two 718 Caymans side by side. He has to compromise his exit onto the start-finish straight, and he's going to have to stay behind at least until turn one here. It's bringing the advantage now to Will Hardiman, who could have another go here at Garrett Thompson. Oh no, there's been a bit of a concertina in turn one. Garrett Thompson having to get by Marcus Deck, and Hardiman having to check up as well. They both get on by. Maxime Detilly is starting to creep back up on these guys as well. So Deck and Botifer now separated for at least the next few laps, but now looks like Will Hardiman has fallen back quite some way from Garrett Thompson, and Maxime Detilly is going to run side by side with him into the turn, and Hardiman actually lifting early to let Detilly go. That's interesting.
I'm as confused as your tone of voice sounded on that one there as well.
Why did he do that?
Yeah, look at the train of cars coming over the hill there in that section, our GT4 competitors and our GT class as well. The lead battle in that GT class, though, still just a couple tenths of a second. You have to imagine if it stays like this until the pit stops, and Robert Harris has just been following him around, you know, a 1 second shorter pit stop from Robert Harris would do it to grab the race lead.
It certainly would, and Robert Harris would certainly have a very sweet-tasting victory if that were the case. We think that's how it's going to work out, but we shall wait and see. Once again, remember, we have a YouTube viewer prize code as the lead has started to come together here. The battle is now on. Use the code word J is the man. Send the code word to geodesic@gmail.com. Winner selected at random. $25. Remember, J is the man to geodesic@gmail.com. This lead battle now in the GT class is... I cannot believe how it's going here. They've been picking their way through traffic. Racine Fazui has been incredibly hard fought here in the third, in the first place. Sorry if I can find my words. Race control, we have some news. Will Hardiman has been given a drive-through penalty for the incidents on the track. So race control were looking at what was going on out on track there, David, and Hardiman deemed at fault.
That sort of fits with how I saw it. I wasn't sure that from the tap the concertina in turn one, a penalty was necessary. I'm not sure a penalty was necessary from what we saw at China Beach and coming over the hill. But if they're playing strict and they're keeping score and they put both together, they might say maybe Will Hardiman was being just a little bit too reckless. I mean, we want to see them able to race and able to fight and able to battle. And in closed cockpit cars, if they, rub doors once in a battle, that should probably be fair game if it's two guys racing hard trying to get the same corner. But, you add it all together, maybe that's what they were thinking of.
Yeah, most likely. But Marcus Deck now still under some immense pressure here from John Botifer for third. And these two guys have been trading places a couple of times over the course of the last few laps. Botifer has had a great turn of pace in this last section of the 1 hour and 15 minutes. Marcus Deck, he keeps on returning, keeps on fighting back. Okay, so we've gotten some clarification on the race control decision for Will Hardiman. it is not because of an incident, it is because he went over the incident limit. There's a 15 incident limit in this championship, and before that, and if you exceed that, you get a penalty. So that is what has happened to Will Hardiman. And the battle spaced out once again between Marcus Deck and John Botifer. But elsewhere in the field, battles are still continuing. Not just these guys, but our leaders in GT, Fazui and Harris. We got 8th and 9th in GT, Ackles and Henriquez close together. Jack Anderek and Stacey Dunnigan too, starting to come together too.
Interesting phase of the race as we've had a fair chunk of the race, but we're still anticipating the bulk of pit stops from either class. And sort of interesting in these 75-minute races is, we have, an hour or so of exciting racing, and then in that last 15 minutes, some of the strategy that's been woven through the first part of the race sort of shows and has a bit of a sting in the tail of these races.
Yeah, there does seem to be a sting in the tail. I mean, I remember back in round 2 at Barber, the GS class seemed perfectly encapsulated by Andrew Caron, but he made a mistake on the final lap, and Brian Lockwood came through to take victory. Just goes to show these races are not over until the checkered flag flies. Giovanni Romano in the Big Bone Racing, in the Lavender Racing, sorry. Porsche being chased by the Big Bone of Graham Sanders. For 5th and 6th in GS, Romano coming away with a podium finish at Barcelona last round and still running very strongly. He's one of the drivers that we've seen some good things out of in the GS class. Tyson Meyer making his way through. That's our 3rd place runner in GT at the moment, and the guy that was leading the championship until last round. But Giovanni Romano with
Notice something
slightly
interesting.
worked exit. Yes?
Well, through the carousel, the pole lap from Marcus Deck, he went down in a 2nd gear to get that rotation and get that torque in qualifying. Just then, on board with Sanders, he was holding it in 3rd gear. He just didn't have maybe the grip at the rear of the car. Maybe it was just a little bit slicker with all the whatnot that's been put down on the racetrack, etc. He's not going down in 2nd gear in some places that we might see if you're on an all-out assault.
Yes, indeed. Romano ran wide there, just ahead of Graham Sanders. So it's going to give the advantage now to the Big Bone number 100. Could be a move into the carousel, potentially. No, Romano's going to cover him off there on the inside. And Romano goes down there into 2nd as Sanders goes into 2nd as well. So I think it might just be a case of how does the car feel through the corner? Do you feel like 2nd gear is going to give you a little bit too much oversteer on the exit? And that's why they've decided to use 3rd gear on a couple of laps. Romano continues to stay ahead, though, despite running slightly wide in turn 1. Goes to show that even if you do make a slight mistake here at Mid-Ohio, you can still stay ahead.
Harris is through into the
no.
lead. Maxim Detilli's in the barrier.
Oh, no. So there's been that lead change then in GT class, but Maxime Detilly with an off-track adventure, and that is towards the back end of the circuit. I'm just taking a look at it now on my end as we go to a building optimization systems replay. And unfortunately, he did it all on his own, did Maxime. On the run up into the right-hander, coming over this rise, easy to get the car unsettled. And Detilly coming into the pits, and that is what has caused that pretty heavy into the barrier as well. So he's going to have some damage repaired. To top it off, Detilly has overshot his pit box. So this race is just going from bad to worse for him. Meanwhile, it is a new leader for Robert Harris. He managed to find his way past in the previous lap. We'll see how he did it here. Because Racine Fazui was, it looks like it was coming into traffic that had happened, and it was quite the interesting run, going 3 wide there with Dominic Olivier, and very decisive driving by Harris to duck to the inside and cover off an attack from Fuzui. That's what gave him the lead.
Yeah, indeed, you can see that once again. This happens sometimes. There's a whole bunch of traffic, and Racing Fuzui has tried to pick a lane. It's turned out to be the wrong one. Harris dives down the inside there, stays all the way to the left, and that ends up being the correct choice.
Yeah, it indeed does. He notices that he has the overlap on Fuzui and just slots himself right in front so that there is no potential for an attack. So Robert Harris now holds the lead of this motor race by just over 0.3 of a second versus Racine Fuzui. Both of them staying out of the pits, continuing to do so. They're going to be running nice and long here. That's a problem for Will Hardiman down at the back end of the circuit.
It always becomes a problem for Johan Boyson as well, as he arrives on the scene there, but manages to just check it up and avoid incident. Building optimization systems replay, of course. It's up on the curb there. That's not the problem though. It's where we'd seen Detilly come unstuck, but this time it wasn't the car bouncing on the bumps. It was just 2 tires in the grass. Easy to do there as you try to open up the entrance to the corner. There's sort of 3 right-handers in a row. You try and smooth them into 1 right-hander, and he's opened it up too far.
Yeah, that's it. You are struggling with understeer through that section. Will Hardiman battling with Johan Boyson as we saw John Botifer come out of the pits. He has taken his stop in GS, so the battle between himself and Marcus Deck still has yet to be decided. But Mr. Boyson going defensive here versus Hardiman. And Boyson on the brakes just a little bit earlier. Hardiman very deep and staying on the racing line. And a bit of an oversteer for Boyson in the mid-corner there. His McLaren is not looking fun to drive at the moment. Poor Johan struggling massively with instability.
It's looking fun. It's not looking relaxing. Those are 2 very different things sometimes. Yeah, certainly. Everyone driving the McLaren just appears to be really struggling with the grip at the rear of the car.
Aaron Ackles, meanwhile, facing off against another of our McLarens, Luis Henriquez, running in 8th place. And seeing that there's troubles for Blake Neck. He was running in 4th place, but he has disappeared. Seems that there's technical issues for the Geodesic Ferrari. So there's going to be an extra position for these guys, Ackles and Henriquez.
More trouble for Will Hardiman.
Oh, no. Oh, and that is especially bad. Some big damage on the rear of his car, and that is at turn 1. We'll go to another replay, see what happened to him here. Was coming into turn 1, and he was a long way ahead of Boyson. Managed to eke out the gap. He went for the move there on the inside, but just pushing a bit too hard and compromising the exit. And recovering, and Boyson ran straight into him. The speed difference, it seems, was just a bit too much to contend with. Remember, the car is under immense load through that first turn, so Boyson couldn't really alter his line. Well, I mean, he certainly could have at that point. It was just past the exit, but I don't think he was expecting Mr. Hardiman to fishtail as much as he had. So a very unfortunate incident between those 2. And they'll both be coming away from that licking their wounds.
It really looked like Hardiman had got the car back under control, and as Boyson continues to approach, then it appears that he's still, steering left, steering right, trying to get that car back under control to come together there, as Boyson just couldn't read what was going to happen in front.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing about this kind of racing sometimes. You get into the rhythm, you see a car having troubles in front of you, and something unexpected happens. You do get into quite a rhythm in longer races like this. But Ackles and Henriquez continue to fight, making their way past one of the big bone GS class cars. These guys, it seems, a bit of a stalemate between the 2 at the moment. Lead battle, meanwhile, has extended somewhat. Robert Harris now enjoying a lead of over a second from Racine Fazui. So it seems that what Harris needed was to get by, and then he's been unleashed into the lead. Johan Boyson has taken some damage repair, and he has come out of the pits in his McLaren. So he'll come back out a lap down there, down in 15th position in class. Not the kind of result he would have been looking for.
No, real shame. Real shame there. Closest battle in GT, though. Ackles and Henriquez. Aaron Ackles started out of 15th place. Henriquez started out of 9th. So both of these guys have, picked up some positions here, jumped up the order.
They certainly have. And Ackles, it seems, the biggest mover in the entire GT class, gaining that 9 positions. He still has yet to pit, though. Wait and see how it goes. In terms of drivers that have pitted, Zach Plummer, Maxime Detilly, Stacey Dunnigan, Jason Goddard, Hayden Gober, Dominic Olivier, and Johan Boyson are the drivers that have already toured through the pits at the moment. Currently, the shortest pit stop time is held by Maxime Detilly, just 7 seconds spent at a standstill. So, continuing with that fuel-saving strategy.
Detilly's just picked up one more spot off Zach Plummer, though, who's now no longer the leading of the cars that have pitted. Wind back the tape on that one. Rear tires just let go towards the carousel there, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks like it. Oh no, it looks like it might actually be the keyhole, something like that. I'm not quite
Turn
sure.
2 it was. Yep.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Well, nonetheless, it's still a shame for Zach Plummer, one of the strongest runners in the GT class at the start of the race, and a guy that we certainly know is capable of excellent results. The lead between Harris and Fazui still staying in the realm of half a second to a second as they pick their way through traffic. We'll be keeping an eye on these guys to see when they decide to pit, because Harris, it seems, has been saving fuel behind Racine Fazui for quite some time before he passed him. But going nice and tight in the carousel once again, continuing to stay out. .5 of a second, though, the gap stays at, because, so, Racine Fazui keeping Robert Harris very honest here. Meanwhile, Brian Lockwood in GS, well, he has kept Andrew Caron honest for a lot of this race, running quite quick times, taking 0.2 out of Caron on the last lap. Actually closer to 0.3 on that particular lap, so Lockwood on fire at the moment.
Yeah, looks like his last lap was his best lap of the race. Might have been the fastest GS class lap of the race as well. My timing screen only tells me the overall fastest lap. But a couple of these guys, as they burn the fuel down, are starting to get a little bit quicker, and none more so than Brian Lockwood.
And you are right, David. It was the fastest GS lap of the race that Brian Lockwood just set. So the second phase of the race is certainly a time where Lockwood is coming alive. Andrew Caron having to contend with a bit of passing. GT, Stacey Dunnigan just making his way past Andrew Caron. So the closest 2 battles on track still remain our lead battle in GT and the battle for 6th in GT between Ackles and Enriquez. There hasn't been much change in either of them. The gap is staying relatively consistent. But we're sure that the race is going to come alive very, very soon. As we enter our final 15 minutes, we're going to see a flurry of pit stops, I would expect.
Yet we're now about to reach that 1 hour elapsed in this race, and that will just about signify the point of a lot of these cars getting towards the end of their fuel tank. Not as fast here at Mid-Ohio as maybe at Barcelona, which is a little bit more flat out. But certainly getting to right in the middle of the pit stop window, expect to see some of our drivers aim for that pit entry. It's an interesting one here. You kind of got to go wide through the carousel and then slow it up to avoid a wall.
Yeah, certainly. It is a very strange pit entry here at Mid-Ohio. And I hope that we get it demonstrated live by one of these drivers. But our 2 GT class leaders stay once again out of the pits as they come around to start their 45th lap of this race. I have to commend the drive from the likes of Robert Harris and Brian Lockwood with Lockwood making the gains that he had. Andrew Caron, though, have to say, after starting in second, holding down the lead like he has over the course of this race, something to be proud of, and it's certainly going to help him in the championship battle with Brian Lockwood. 2 GT class runners making their way through, Jason Goddard and Adam Crane. Crane, we haven't talked much about in this race, but he started in 5th. He's had a quiet race and is still running in 4th in class as Adam Crane. So a very good run, very consistent. Crane, I think, one of the most under the radar, underrated drivers in the entire GT field for my money.
Well, he's certainly doing well right now in the top 5. And I think he's one of those drivers who has enough in hand that he'll come out ahead of Maxime Detilly. There's some drivers behind there yet to pit in GT class.
Another problem for Will Hardiman, and almost making contact with one of the Audis. Hardiman's race since the halfway point has gone very far south. I think he's just watching the clock and waiting for the nightmare to be over for Will. Racine Fazui is looking to try and cause a nightmare here for Robert Harris as they pass the start zone. Up into the top of 6th gear. Coming up on a bit of traffic as well. Looks like that might be Botifer in the GS class car, and they're coming very close together now. This is the battle between Botifer and Sanders for 5th place. They both made their way past cleanly, but Harris once again has the advantage coming out of that battle situation. Fazui's exit from the right-hander was compromised. But Botifer versus Sanders. Botifer, we got to remember, has already pitted, so he is good to the end of this one. He could potentially...
I just
oh,
thought...
yeah. Yeah, we actually have, and it's Robert Harris, our leader, that has come in GT. So this is going to trigger the final pit stop cycle. Once Harris pits, everyone else does.
Tyson Myers also pitted from 3rd. Gosh, have we said much at all about Tyson this race? He's just been there. 3rd. I feel like I haven't said quirkatized at all today.
Yeah, actually, we haven't.
Probably good for the man.
Yeah, because, I mean, Tyson Meyer, he's an excellent driver. Can never take that away from him. But we have seen that he can make mistakes under pressure. And that's usually been where he's made the headlines. It's been a very quiet race for him at Mid-Ohio, which I think is a very good thing. With a 3rd place finish here, he'll be able to consolidate his position in the championship and live to fight for those final 2 rounds of the series. Maxime Detilly, meanwhile, we suspect trying to shorten his pit stop or potentially go for a no-stop strategy.
Already pitted. He's going to the
already
end.
pitted.
Yeah, so he is in 9th. And you look at the timing screen, you've got to wonder, with about a 20-ish second pit lane transit time and everyone else needing a bit of fuel, that everyone who pitted who's within about 40 seconds in front of him is liable to get swallowed up.
Yes, indeed. Mucho correcto indeed. Racine Fazui has made his way into the pits, and we'll see what kind of advantage Harris has gotten by pitting a lap earlier. Fazui has only just come to a stop here. trying his best here to get the fuel done, but Harris is already by as Racine Fazui pulls away at the exit of pit lane, and Harris retakes the lead. And all up, it seems like Fazui has not lost much there behind Robert Harris, so the battle is going to continue for these final 15 minutes. It's going to be a question of who has looked after their tyres.
Yeah, so 9.3 seconds of fuel for Robert Harris, 9.4 seconds of fuel for Racine Fazui, 9.5 seconds of fuel for Tyson Meyer in third. So through all of those pit stops there, I think Robert Harris has gained about 1/10 of a second.
Well, 1/10 of a second may be all he needs at the end, and it'll give him an extra little buffer when they come back up to traffic. Caron and Lockwood, meanwhile, the lead battle in GS and the battle for the lead of the championship too. Andrew Caron starting to fall away in terms of time. Brian Lockwood still taking chunks out of him every single lap or thereabouts. Caron, last lap, a 1 minute 27.811, and it's a 6.96 for Lockwood. And have a look at this. We'll have to see if they decide to go for the no-stop strategy, see if that fuel restriction increase has made any difference for these guys up at the top.
I'm imagining we're probably going to see a pit stop from both of these guys, but I just can't be sure on that one. So we are going to have to watch and wait and see in the last couple of laps.
Yeah, well, for our other runners in GS, Graham Sanders has just come out of the pits after fighting with John Botifer, and it looks like Jack Anderek, oh no, that's a problem. Out of fuel in the box? What has gone on there? He's not in the box. He's not made it into his pit box, and he's out of fuel. Oh no! Jack Anderek is devastated. And that's a huge shame for him. He was running extremely well in the class, and now he's not even going to be able to take his pit stop. Building optimization systems replay of what went on for him. It looks like we'll have to go back a little further here.
So what it looks like may have happened is he was right on the number coming into the lane. The car has started coughing on pit road, and he's just not got it into the correct position. The engine's died. So here he's basically coasting it into pit lane, I believe. We're going to see him. Limiter is on. See the revs in the dashboard will let you know when the motor's dead.
He just came up short. Just came up short. That is such a shame for Jack Anderek. He'll be feeling that pain for a while to come. But the race continues between Andrew Caron and Brian Lockwood. The gap is closer than it's ever been since the race settled down. Lockwood on fire once again. A 27.6 once more for Brian Lockwood, with a 27.7 for Andrew Caron. And it seems that Lockwood just continues getting faster and faster lap on lap. I think that might be a new fastest lap in GS for him. No,
He's missed out by just under 1/10 of a second, but certainly it's going to be, I think, 4 or 5 laps left to go for these guys, potentially only 4. So if they're reached this point here with 6 minutes to go and they still need to make a stop, it's going to be for maybe a litre. I don't know.
Either way, it's going to be quite the competition here between our two leaders in GS. Cannot wait to see what happens in these final 5 minutes.
And here's something I've spotted. One GT car that hasn't pitted yet. Adam Crane in the 118. Jeff Sexton and Boyson's also out there having a bit of off-roading as well. So I think the pressure and the temperatures has gotten to a couple of our drivers.
Yeah, looks like it. Unfortunate there for both of those guys, but they both managed to get going. Adam Crane continuing to vault his way up through the field with no pit stop in GT. And we have just heard the great irony of Jack Anderek's stop. He was out of fuel. He overshot his pit box and did not have enough fuel to reverse back into it. I mean, coming up slightly short of the box is one thing, but slightly over is another entirely. That is a big shame for Anderek, and you certainly have my sympathies.
Jeff Sexton is still parked there beside the circuit. Am I seeing that correctly?
I think you are correct. What is going on there?
Is he out of fuel?
Looks like he might be. No revs. Yeah. Fuel level 0.0. There you go. That's
I don't
unfortunate there for
we
Sexton.
can actually screen peek their fuel levels like that. It might say 0 for everyone, but
It
certainly
does.
said 0 on the
It
car.
does.
Yeah. Well, it sounded good when you said it. I'm sorry to bring the house crashing down on that one.
It's okay.
Triggers of me.
I have home insurance. It's all right. I can get a new one.
Check in the wall.
Oh, yeah, Marcus Deck into the wall as this battle continues. There we go. Right past. Oh, no, it's Watajek. Okay. So, my apologies for getting the name wrong. It looks like a big
Crazy
fishtail.
last 5 minutes we've had.
Yeah, I cannot believe what's gone on. It's all gone off. And we have confirmed that Jeff Sexton is out of fuel, so he may have to get permission there from race control to tow back to the pits. This lead battle is still not over in GS, though. Lockwood dipping a wheel off in the grass as he pursues Andrew Caron, and it's going to be Will Hardiman trying to make his way past, and Lockwood going for the move around the outside of the keyhole. Does he have the momentum? Not quite to get alongside, but he does have the late apex and the draft down the straight. This could be the change for the lead in GS. Through goes Hardiman on them, leaving them clear to drive as they want. But it looks like Lockwood just holding back for one more lap at least. This is not over, though.
This is going to be a nail-biting last couple of minutes in GS class, like we've seen time and time again this year.
Yeah, for sure. Adam Crane, meanwhile, in GT, still has not pitted. So, with only 2 minutes to go on the race, unless he goes for a splash and dash, I think we'll have to give Adam strategy of the race. Lockwood falling back slightly from Caron, meanwhile. But we know how strong Lockwood is in the faster turns around here. That's a big problem for Dominic Olivier, having to make a 3-point turn in the pits. What has gone on for him there? In comes Lockwood into the pits. So here we go. At least one of our GS class leaders has had to come in, and it's an incredibly short stop for Brian Lockwood. He was stationary for barely any time at all. Now we have to wait and see what Andrew Caron does in response.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one lap to go for Lockwood there. So he's basically pitting at the white flag. The only way that gamble pulls off is if he thinks Andrew Caron is going to run out, and that's happened already. Not for Caron, but to other drivers in the class, is my point.
Yes, indeed. Robert Harris, meanwhile, still holding on to that lead in GT. It's been an excellent run. Caron, it seems, will have an extra lap here because he is far enough ahead of the leaders. So hopefully he has the fuel to make it home. Otherwise, he may just lose out to Lockwood, but we can't be too sure. Giovanni Romano in third place. He's run extremely well in this one. We'll see what Andrew Caron does here. Going to the inside once again. He is not going for the stop. Still got 2 laps to go, though, has Andrew Caron. Robert Harris is going to come across, I think, just before the timer goes to 0. So this is going to be white flag for Robert Harris with just 12 seconds left on the clock. And what a drive it has been from our leader here in the GT class, starting in second and putting on a very measured drive and taking the advantage in the pit stop cycle to get past Racine Fazui. What about Brian Lockwood, though? He could potentially take the lead back from Andrew Caron here. Caron is still ahead of our leaders in GT, so he is going to have a bit more time to work with.
Caron is lifting like his life depends on it. It kind of does in this circumstance. I wonder if he can force himself a lap down to your overall leader in this situation. Otherwise, he's got loads of time to play with. He can lift and coast everywhere, but he's got to make it to the end. He's got to see that checkered flag.
Well, a driver that is about to see that checkered flag is Robert Harris. We'll see what Andrew Caron does here at the very end. It looks like a slow-moving GS car probably to go down a lap on the leader, but Caron is going to stay ahead as much as he can. And there's no way Harris will catch him from here. Robert Harris is going to come home and take an excellent victory here in the Geodesic GoPro Championship at Mid-Ohio. One more reminder, as Racine Fazui crosses the line to get second and Tyson Meyer is going to finish third. Brian Lockwood is going to come home with second in the GS class. Giovanni Romano and Marcus Deck, though, still not over for third place in GS. Marcus trying his best to round up to Romano, who has not pitted, we should say. No pitting from Giovanni Romano, and what an excellent drive for him to come home with third place. He has done enough. What about Andrew Caron, though? He is still on a racing lap, and he is going very, very slow into the braking zones. He's babying this car around the circuit.
He could get out and push at this point. Second place and down have seen the checkered flag. He just needs to get to the end of this lap.
Well, if he does, and it looks like he will, this is going to be a masterful victory for Andrew Caron. Faced off against Marcus Deck, against Brian Lockwood, and came off all the better in this race, and this is going to really help his championship fight with Mr. Lockwood. So one more turn now for Andrew Caron, and he will celebrate victory in GS. Choking across the line. He is out of fuel, but he did absolutely everything he needed.
You got to applaud that. There was so much pressure there towards the end, and he's done the numbers correctly. He's kept the car on track and rightly been rewarded with the big points.
For sure. Well, race over, and we go through the results. Robert Harris, starting from second, managed to leap into the lead and take it by 0.6 of a second over Racine Fazui. Tyson Meyer having an unusually quiet event there to come home in a strong third place. Adam Crane not pitting and coming home in fourth. Excellent drive from him. Garrett Thompson rounding out the top 5 in GT. Luis Henriquez comes home the last car on the lead lap. Aaron Ackles, Zach Plummer, Maxime Detilly, and Stacey Dunnigan rounding out the top 10. But I think Maxime Detilly would have been hoping for a little bit more from that one. Rest of our GT field, Jason Gotter had quite a few issues, as did Hayden Gober and Dominic Olivier. Jack Anderek, very unfortunate retirement from the race, just minutes from the end, overshooting his pit box and being out of fuel. Johan Boyson classified 2 laps down as well. Will Hardeman had a very hard event with a car that didn't seem to agree with him a lot of the time. Blake Neck, a retirement due to technical issues. And Jesper Drulicka, 39 laps down, rounding out our GT class. Time for the GS results.
Yeah, indeed. Andrew Caron gets the win, and he scored a lap ahead of everyone else in class, including second place man Brian Lockwood. Giovanni Romano gets it home in third place on the no-stop strategy, ahead of Marcus Deck, who had no shortage of excitement today. John Botifer then gets fifth place, Graham Sanders in sixth, Alan Powell in seventh. Luke Wodacek was in the wall late in the race, but still limped it home to eighth, ahead of Chris Roberts in ninth. And Jeff Sexton, running that tank dry, finishes in 10th, 5 laps down. I do believe David Browning was unfortunately unable to take the start. We hope we see him again in the 2 remaining rounds.
Yep, certainly do. Those were the race results in your 2 classes today, and now it's time for post-race coverage, driver interviews. And the first driver we're going to speak to is our GT class winner, Robert Harris. Welcome, Robert. You're back on the top step of the podium finally with an excellently executed strategy versus Rasim Fazui. How does it feel?
Oh yeah, it's been a little bit since I've been on the top step of the podium, but it feels amazing after that race. It was very intense racing with Rasim whole way through, and just gotta thank him so much for racing clean, and thanks for the lap cars too for being pretty much obedient most of the time. Was a really intense race, yeah.
Yeah, around a track like Mid-Ohio, we always thought traffic was going to be an interesting problem, but fuel saving as well is possible. Were you saving fuel behind Rasim?
Uh, Honestly, not really that much. I just kind of got in that mode. All you can do is push, and really wasn't saving that much. I decided to pit a lap earlier than him because I saw we had a GT4 about 5 seconds ahead. So just decided to pit a lap earlier than him. But fuel wise, I don't think we were really that different.
Fair enough. Well, how does the Audi cope with Mid-Ohio? Because we know that the car has improved as the builds have gone on, but it can still be an interesting car around tracks that are bumpy and have a lot of elevation change.
Yeah, for sure. Mid Ohio is one of the tracks that has a lot of elevation changes, and it makes for quite a fun track. The Audi handled it pretty well, uh, especially at the start. Towards the end, the tires started to fall away and got a little bit scary, but it was fine for most of the race. And around track like here, it's just so fun.
Well, nonetheless, it feels good to get back onto the top step of the podium as the season is approaching its final two races. And I guess now your focus moves to them to try and consolidate a good championship position.
Yeah, hopefully we can maybe sneak a top five in the championship. I don't know if it's possible yet, but I don't think we're going to be anywhere close to winning the whole thing. So hopefully hopefully we can still do well in the next two rounds though, and close out with a good finish.
Well, thanks for joining us, Robert. Before we let you go, any shout outs and sponsors? Who gets it done for Team Tortuga?
Yeah, shout out to the team again, and once again, shout out to Rasim. It was an amazing race with him, and without him racing clean, that battle wouldn't have happened. So shout out to him as well.
Thank you very much for joining us, Robert Harris, race winner in the GT class. Andrew Caron, meanwhile, taking an excellent victory in the GS class, has stood by with David Haynes.
Yeah, well, congrats on getting that win, Andrew. Fantastic performance. One of the only couple of drivers in the class to make that no-stop strategy. A slight reduction in the fuel from some of the previous rounds. It must have been really tough.
Oh yeah, for sure. I had to save for the whole race, in fact. So I saw that at the start. I started to have a good gap because Brian and Marcus were battling. So I just started saving and saving. So that's all I did all race. And even when Brian was going so fast behind me, I wasn't sure if he had enough fuel or not, but I kept just saving fuel.
Well, it wasn't a massive pace difference between GT3 and GT4 cars here. It's a pretty twisty last couple sectors of the lap. How did you find traffic?
Oh yeah, at the last part of the track, it was really scary because it's really tight, and the GT3 are behind you, and they want to pass. To be honest, it was really scary. You don't want to slow them down, but like you still need to keep your line. So it was really scary sometimes.
And in addition to that, also relatively hot day, hot track temperatures cooling off a little bit later in the race. But did you have to worry about tire wear? Did you have to worry about the balance of the car? What was what was going on in your mind?
To be honest, when we were getting close to the end, the tires were pretty rough to drive on. The GT4 is not really a car made to run at really high temperature for 1 hour at a really short track like that with a lot of corners. So at the end, it was really scary. And even though I saved fuel, I kept my pace up. So in the corner, my tire were still being used a lot.
Well, congrats on that win. And it's one of those times you've been able to hold off Brian Lockwood. What do you fancy your chances in the championship now that it's pretty close?
To be honest, I'm here for good racing, but I do look forward for winning the championship. But for that, I will need to be on my top game and like be on a podium every races. So it maybe comes up with luck. I might crash next race, or Brian might crash next race. So we never know. And he got P2 this race, so he still got a lot of point there.
Well, we look forward to seeing you in the 2 remaining races of this championship. Anyone you need to thank?
I would like to thank my teammate at Mivano. They're really supportive. They really helped me a lot, and I will also like to thank you guys for commentating on the races, and Geodesic for organizing the races.
There we go. Reese, your winner in GS class.
Yes, indeed, Andrew Caron. Thank you very much for joining us. The next driver we're going to speak
on
to.
purpose, just
Oh, apologies, Rasim Fazui, for the surprise. Our second place finisher in GT. Welcome to the commentary box, Rasim. Unfortunate to have lost the race to Robert Harris through the pit stop cycle, but it was a great battle for the lead between you two for much of the race.
yeah, GG. Kudos to Robert. Amazing race. I have nothing to say. We were both clean. We both pushed really hard. Shout out to most of the traffic because you guys were awesome. Okay, especially at the end, you guys let us by, no biggie. So that was really nice. But it was just an overall racing performance, and he was able to achieve a better performance today.
Well, for you, making a nice strong start here at Mid-Ohio, how is the circuit for you, especially in the Audi? Because Robert Harris told us that the Audi deals with this place very nicely.
He has to send me his setup then, because I was switching traction control. I was breathing on the throttle. I was doing everything to keep my tires up. At some point, I thought his tires were going down, but then he was just right up my tail, and I saw all the pack falling through. So it's racing is a package, and he had the whole package today, and he took the victory.
Nonetheless, it's still a good result for you taking second, and a good haul of points for your championship coming into the final 2 rounds.
Yep, taking it one race at a time. I could have sent it on a final lap, but I was about to lose it at the end of the second sector. I told myself, no, let's chill, let's get that second place. And I'm looking forward for the next races. Hopefully to make an MFAC on Zandvoort. Daytona, the Mercedes is a bit better than the Audi. So, yep, taking it one race at a time.
Well, coming up to the next round at Zandvoort in 2 weeks' time, we will be interested to see how you go. Before we let you go, Rasim Fazui, you may be a privateer now, but is there anyone you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I want to thank SimSpeed for the great broadcast. iRacing TV network. I forgot the name. I'm so sorry. I want to thank also Geodesic and GoPro for sponsoring this amazing race series, and I want to thank all the guys in the racing series. You guys are awesome.
Indeed, it was an excellent race for sure. Rasim Fazui, your second place finisher in GT. Couple of extra interviews in our GS class. Second place, it was Brian Lockwood. An excellent battle between the 2 GS class leaders, David.
Yeah, Brian, you must be not a fan of low fuel lights at this point because you were right there with him towards the end and just obviously hadn't had as much opportunity through the race to save as much fuel as he could.
Yes, I was. And, I was in a position, especially after that incident, that scuffle with Marcus, I was really in a position where I had to just, I could either fuel save and settle for second or go for it and probably finish second, but have some fun doing it. So that's what I ended up choosing. Made it up to Andrew's back bumper, but that was mostly because I was pushing and he wasn't. So very well deserved one.
Tell us about that little battle with Marcus Deck there. I mean, sometimes at Mid Ohio, you can go too wide for a couple corners in a row. It's the first time I've seen race control intervene and ask a position to be redressed like that.
Yeah, I like that they did that. I mean, I certainly feel like I got pushed off. Um, I just got run out of room, and it's good to see race control taking action in a way that isn't super drastic. It doesn't really destroy anybody's race, but at the same time, makes things right. So unfortunately, lost a bit of time there, but in the end, got the spot, and I don't think it would have mattered anyway.
2 races to go in the championship, pretty close in the GS class standings. Are we going to see you for the remaining 2 races?
Oh, I'll be here. To what capacity? I'm not so sure. Of course, I've been extremely focused on the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup, putting tons of time into that. So unfortunately, haven't been able to prepare so much for the Geodesic series. But I'll be here. I'm certainly intending to fight for the championship. I'd really like to defend my title, but Andrew's certainly coming. So it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, we hope you rise to the challenge. We hope we see you again in 2 weeks' time at Zandvoort.
Oh, you will. I'll be here.
There we go. Forgot to ask you who you want to thank. You're still here, Brian. Who do you want to thank?
Yeah. Just thanks to everybody at Racecraft Esports, and I want to give a special shout out to Luca Crisafi, who was with me spotting for me today, and also has been helping me for a couple dozen hours with the Super Cup training, helping me look through data and all that stuff. So just a huge thank you to him. He's been a massive help lately.
Awesome. Well, see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, David.
Brian Lockwood there, second place finisher in GS class, and we have Giovanni Romano in the box too, David, third place.
Yeah. Tell us about the fuel strategy out there, Gio, because we've already heard from Andrew Caron, and you, him, and Luke Wadacek, the only 3 drivers in class who are able to dodge the pit lane this race.
Yeah, that was a heck of a race, and yeah, the fuel strategy was certainly interesting. The league admins lowered our fuel cap a little bit for this race in order to make it interesting, and they definitely did. I was saving fuel from lap 1, and I had a little bit left at the end, enough for the cool down lap, but it was pretty tight.
Mid Ohio, a bit shorter, a bit twistier, quite a bit different to Barcelona. How was the adjustment? Any setup changes needed and different driving style for this place?
Well, I should thank Andrew Karen for sharing a setup with me in one of the practices. I found it a touch better than what I was using, so thanks to him for that. But other than that, Mid Ohio is probably one of my better tracks, so I didn't need to do too much adjustment. I'd already raced it a couple weeks ago in another league, so I was pretty comfortable out there.
Yeah, indeed. Bit of pressure the last couple of laps from Marcus Deck, who obviously didn't have to worry about fuel. How'd you keep him behind?
Yeah, oh man, I was definitely feeling the pressure there when I saw him pit and come out just a second or so behind me. And I knew from when I was trailing him, I was pretty close on pace. He's probably a touch faster than me, so I just knew I had saved enough fuel at that point, so I was able to push a bit and just barely keep him behind me.
Well, I hope we're going to see you for the closing rounds of this championship, see where you end up in that. I've also heard you're doing rather well in the gentlemen's championship, so maybe afterwards Reese will describe more about that one, but certainly plenty for you to race for in the remaining couple races.
Yeah, I think the only thing that didn't go well today was the gentleman's championship because I picked up a few incident points, and the guy I'm fighting against went out there and did an excellent 0x. I think Mr. Ackles. So I think we're tied going into the last two races. So yeah, that'll be just another battle to be sorted out in the last two races.
Well, anyone you'd like to thank and got any words for our producer who didn't update your paint on this broadcast?
Are you kidding me? Wow. Well, that's a shame. But thanks to you guys for the broadcast. Anyways, you always do a really good job, and thanks to Geodesic for putting on a good series. That was a great race, and of course, thanks to Team Huge Ass.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Giovanni Romano, third place finisher in GS class. And in terms of the Gentleman's Championship, which counts incident points, Aaron Ackles was running 3 points behind Giovanni Romano before this round. So there's definitely going to be some changes in terms of that. But that is bringing to an end proceedings for tonight, David. And I am really satisfied with how that race has gone. It was an excellent event for round 6 of the Geodesic GoPro Championship. And we're happy to announce that we have a winner for our viewer code prize. And remember, it was the first person to send in Jay is the man to geodesicracing@gmail.com. Kane Halliburton from Racecraft Esports is the winner of that $25 cash, thanks to our sponsors and thanks to Geodesic Racing. A big thanks to Alpine Stars as well for sponsoring the for the longest run without an incident award. That is still being determined by Race Control, but will be announced in the coming hours. And of course, a big thanks to GoPro as well for the sponsorship of this series and for your continued support of this excellent series. Zandvoort is in 2 weeks' time, David. Another very different circuit going to the Netherlands for the penultimate round of the season.
Yeah, and also going to be a little bit of a shorter lap than, Barcelona or some other places. So look for the interactions in traffic to be key again. And yeah, these races always a slow burner where, there's some excitement at the start and then we're just waiting for that last 15 or 20 minutes where the strategy unravels, where drivers have to fight hard for position and everything they've been setting up, all of their chess moves from the start of the race, leads to these fantastic race finishes we've been seeing. And I can't imagine it's going to be any different.
Exactly. Same time, same day, in 2 weeks' time at the same place here on the iRacing Esports Network. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for round 6 of the Geodesic GoPro Championship. From ourselves at SimSpeed TV here on the iRacing Esports Network. It's bye for now, but not forever. Zandvoort's coming up.
This is fantastic. This is GT racing right now. He's got traction. He's got everything outside of both of them. Maloney. Oh, he's taking Anderson. Anderson's up to him. Oh, my God. Oh, big crash. Oh, my goodness. Half the field's going to get rolled.
Second very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly. Oh, there we go. Oh, no. That's massive. This is it. This is over. I can't believe this. Oh, my God.
God, what?